Talk to us very briefly about sort of iodine, B12, calcium, omega-3 and 6, sort of those typical what vegans might miss in their diet.
Yeah, the sorts of things which people, I guess, are concerned that they're going to be missing. I think the starting point is to say that there shouldn't be any concerns about getting most of that stuff. As long as you have a good vegan diet with a lot of fresh green leafy veg. A lot of those things are in reasonable quantities in vegan food, but more important is that if you have the balance of your diet right, the body absorbs them and uses them. So some of the dairy products are very high in calcium, but they're not readily absorbed and used by the body. So some of the plant-based sources of calcium are actually better, even though there are lower percentages of calcium in the food, the body can absorb them and use them better. There are one or two things, like iodine is a good example where certainly the Vegan Society would recommend that we do take a supplement of B12 and iodine because it is quite difficult to get it in a vegan-based diet. You could do it, but it would take a fair bit of thinking.
Like fortified foods, can't you?
Yes.
Milk, almond milk with B12 and then butter with B12.
Yeah, so B12 is present in a lot of fortified foods. Personally, especially during the winter, every other day I'd take a vegan supplement just to make sure I'm covered.
Anything you want to recommend? Anything that you...
Well, the one I use is the Vegan Society's own one.
But the little tub.
Yeah, I come in and call it Veg 12, something like that. And it's a pretty good price from the Vegan Society, and you're helping support them a little bit as well. If we can, things like iodine, if you can use things like kelp and some seafood, marine-based seaweed type products, then certainly you can get the iodine. But the B12 is the tricky one. You really got to get it from fortified foods these days or as a supplement.
Omega-3 and 6.
It was interesting, having been vegan for 30 years, about a year ago I went to my GP and got some blood tests done, and the only thing that came back as being slightly low was my omega-3 levels, and particularly one of the omega-3s. So I started doing a little bit of research on that, and I discovered that quite often a vegan diet is very rich in omega-6 in proportion to omega-3. And the strange thing about omegas is that it's not just the amount you take in, it's the ratio, the proportion between 6 and 3. It needs to be in the right proportion, and sometimes as vegans we tend to have too much 6 in relation to 3. That's the one other supplement I have added to my diet just over the last 12 months, some omega-3 supplements, just to try and raise that level. And I've just tweaked my diet as well, stopped using things like sunflower oil at all, moving to rapeseed oil.
Yeah, I just recently did that too.
Yeah, so if you look at things that are higher in 3 than 6, and just tweak it a little bit. Flaxseed is another example.
You have that with your oatmeal in the morning?
Yeah, and it's best to obviously grind those flax seeds. If you're not eating an oil, if you're going to eat actual seeds, then grind them and add them in. And obviously omega-3 is important for brain function and possibly linked to Alzheimer's and dementia.
Students out there, omega-3.
Definitely memory, yeah. So I think that's a really important one, to just do a little bit of research on that omega-3 6 thing.
Any myths about vegan diets you want to dispel? Anything that maybe some vegans that are more around spirituality are sort of taking a lot of, and maybe they shouldn't, and other things that maybe people think we should be taking that we don't actually need that much of?
I mean, one of the things which has been dispelled very recently is the whole protein amino acid thing. Vegans and vegetarians having to combine their proteins because most vegetable sources of protein are incomplete. They don't have all the essential amino acids. So we used to think that, for example, if we took wholemeal bread and put beans on it, then that would make a complete amino acid meal, and we should eat those at the same meal. Whereas I think now we accept that that's not important. You don't have to have them in the same meal, as long as over a period of days and weeks you get your vegetable protein sources from a variety of different sources, grains, legumes, being soya-based products. If you hit those, things like quinoa is actually a classic example of a grain which is relatively high in protein. Tofu, bean curd, is a fantastic source of protein. And we also get a surprising amount of protein from things like peas and some of those green vegetables which you wouldn't normally associate with protein. Even wholemeal bread has grams of protein. They make sort of bodybuilding protein from peas as well. Yeah, they do. Yeah, a lot of the bodybuilders who want to not have dairy-based products are now looking at pea protein as well as soy protein rather than whey. So I think that whole protein myth has been put to rest now. It's fairly easy. I think it's fairly easy as long as you know what you're doing. You're careful with your diet that you can get enough protein. Definitely.
I actually met you through a talk that you gave at the Veggie Vegan Fair. Now, do you do that regularly? Do you give talks elsewhere? And do you generally talk around the sort of educational side? And do you do it because you see it as your mission to make more vegans out in the world? Or what are your reasons?
Okay, I guess the starting point for me is I'm not too evangelical about veganism. If people ask me questions, then I will talk to them. And normally there's not a shortage of people coming up and asking you whenever you're out eating, whether it be a business or a pleasure scenario. People are usually interested. So I wouldn't consider myself to be too much of a vegan evangelist or activist. Yeah. But having said that, one of the things we discovered at our restaurant with the Green Cafe is that we have regular Tuesday evening presentations. We get an awful lot of vegetarians and people that are interested in vegetarian food here. So once we had established clientele and got a reasonable database, I just thought there's going to be quite a lot of people there that would be interested in hearing from someone who's been vegan for so long and has done a certain amount of research.
Still alive?
Yeah, and hopefully it doesn't look too bad. So I started doing the first talk here, and interestingly, because I do triathlons, and I like to keep reasonably fit, and so my first talks were always to triathlon clubs, triathlon clubs and running clubs, people that wanted to do events like triathlon, half marathons, marathons on a vegetarian vegan diet.
I did Berlin last year.
Oh, did you? The marathon? That's a good event.
Such a good event.
So the first half dozen talks were all to running clubs and triathlon clubs, and it's only been recently that I've expanded out and done a couple of talks in a bit of the vegan meetup group, and then before that for the Veggie Christmas fair.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I always start my talks off by saying, look, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a scientist, so a lot of what I talk about is just based on experience.
And your own research.
And usually, inevitably, there was someone in the audience that knows a bit more than you do about certain subjects, but that's fine, we'll just share and then you go away and you look again, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's talking, I guess, from experience that is the important thing to me. So I'm happy to do the talks. I don't do too many, but I think I'd rather talk to 20 or 30 people that are interested rather than talk to 50 people that weren't interested. I don't mind the audience challenging what I say, obviously that's part of it. At least if they come along to presentations at the restaurant or the vegan or veggie groups, then they come along with some open minds and
they're among like-minded people as well.
Yeah, and everyone feels quite comfortable and relaxed as well.